Okay. Notice is hereby given and set forth in city municipal code, section 228. Public hearings will be held by the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission at 5:30 p.m. Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. In Common Council Chambers, 108 East Green Street in Ithaca. The commission will consider the following applications for material change or alteration. 106 The Knoll, Cornell Heights Historic District, proposal to replace the front east porch and infill a second-story door. And 105 West Court Street, DeWitt Park Historic District, proposal to install a 32-inch by 32-inch black vinyl sign on the easternmost window in the first story of the north elevation. All interested parties will be given an opportunity at the hearings to be heard in person or by agent respecting these applications. Parties interested in reviewing application materials prior to the meeting may call Brian McCracken at 607-274-6550. If you have a disability and would like specific accommodation to participate, please contact the city clerk at 607-274-6570 by 12 p.m. 2 to 3 business days, not including weekdays or weekends or holidays before the meeting. So we are starting today with, again, 106 The Knoll, Cornell Heights Historic District, proposal to replace the front east porch and infill a second-story door. So, do we have somebody who will be presenting this evening?
There.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hi. Well, can you give us a summary of what's being proposed?
Sure. If it's helpful, I'd like to share my screen.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you. I'm Noah Demarest from Stream Collaborative, representing the owners of the property at 106 The Knoll. We're here looking to do some much needed improvements and repairs to the front porch of this building. And just to kind of point out some of the existing features, this is a recent photograph of the front porch with columns and balustrade that is not original. We actually have some photographs of what this sort of the evolution of this project, which I'll point out over here on the right. We have a photo from the 1930s that actually showed, which presumably was original, but maybe not even, who knows, maybe there was something before that. But from the 1930s, there was a porte-cochere structure that where the driveway could actually pass underneath it, and that was then replaced in the 1950s with what is more or less what's there today. This structure was, I think it was lost to a fire, and I'm not 100% sure about that, but it was pulled back towards the building. And that's, again, more or less what's there today, but it's in pretty bad condition with leaking and rotting wood and so forth. But a couple of things I want to point out is that sort of indicate that it's not original, is you can kind of see this balustrade detail up here is kind of a hodgepodge of just very simple corner newel posts, square newel posts. There's actually a variety of balusters in here of different shapes and sizes, which aren't even consistent. And then there's this kind of double rail, top rail, which was presumably added to sort of create a safety situation because there's actually a door located here. There's a recess panel on the right side, and this is a functioning door, which I believe the owners keep locked. The intent is to sort of prevent people from getting access to this space. It is not intended to be an actively used roof deck space. And then down below, we have 4 columns, excuse me, which are not original again, but they are also, in our opinion, grossly out of scale to the structure that it's supporting. They're probably just very simple columns that were bought in a catalog in the 1950s or somewhere between 1930 and 1950. And so the goal here is to replace it, to repair it, to do something that's more architecturally sympathetic with the original design of the house without going all the way back to the original, what we think is the porte cochere. So what we're proposing here in this sketch is to pick up some of the details of the newel posts that are on the existing on the house and pull that out to the corner and sort of have 2 points that support this balustrade. And those 2 points would be attached to the roof, which would be more of a membrane roof, a flatter roof. There's actually like a very low slope, hip pitched roof there to shed water away from the building. And then we would replace the balustrade with something that we haven't picked the exact detail, but something that's just a little bit nicer and consistent for that detail. And then reconstruct the front porch here, the trim work to be straight across on all 3 sides instead of the pitched detail that was here. And that's really just to create a more of we think a better looking balustrade and just more of a consistent detail all the way around. And excuse me. And then finally, the columns, the corner columns, we're proposing to beef them up a little bit, make them a little bit larger, and also reconcile an issue where they're not currently aligned in kind of a traditional way. They're recessed kind of underneath the porch beam. Instead of traditionally, you would have the shaft of the column, the neck flush with the outer beam. So we're pulling those out to be in a more proper location. But in order to do that, the base of these columns also pulls out a little bit. And so we're proposing to add this kind of stone detail on the corners to help ground these columns in a more natural way without getting into totally replacing the stonework that's there. And we have a little bit of a precedent for that because if you look at the photograph, there's this kind of round boulder type structure or stone on the corner here. So we're proposing to replace that with something that's a little bit larger that actually supports the column itself. So, I mean, that's just a quick summary. I'm happy to answer any questions. We do have a couple of plan details existing and proposed, but I'll leave it at that and maybe we can get into more detail if there are any questions.
Oh, the balustrade above is well, looks to be well lower than either 36 inches or 42 inches height. Is that because there will be no access to that space above?
Correct. We would be eliminating the door and replacing it with a matching panel to the other side. So there would be no access. And I think that's a smart move from a liability point of view. So it's really a decorative balustrade. It is not intended to be a guardrail.
Could you address the replacing an existing bench with a roof or something? I couldn't really see it from the ground, but
yeah, it is hard to see. It's really just a detail that's in this recess of this window. It's just an issue where I think water is getting in there and there's some rot. And so it's essentially a replacement in kind, but the thought is to, instead of having a flat bench, to just give it a little bit of a pitch to shed water away. I don't think you'll see it from the ground or anywhere. So it's really just kind of a replacement to make it more durable for the future.
Where your corner boulders are installed, would they go down like to below frost level? New foundations all under there and everything?
That's not the intent. The hope would be that we're just, replacing, and actually most of the column is supported on the existing stone terrace that's there. It's really just to capture the base that will, by the nature of these columns being a little bit wider, they would be overhanging that stone. So it's just a place to sort of capture that. It's a good question from potentially, I suppose, from a frost heave right on the corner on those. So we haven't gotten that far, but that's a good question. It might be something we need to investigate a little bit closer in terms of how we might support those stones.
And the existing columns, I think are 7 inches and you're proposing 10 inches. That's not too much bigger.
Yeah, I think they're
Not even
not
go
too much.
bigger than that.
They're more consistent with the size of the beam that's there. So trying to match that. Right now, there's the 7 inches is quite a bit smaller than. In fact, I think the 7 inches is kind of at the widest part. So they neck down at the top. They're pretty. I think they're less than that.
Would you mind going through the materials? I mean, and explaining it. I know the proposed columns are fiberglass. What are the materials for the balustrades and the boulder corner and the other components?
Yeah, it's a good question. So all of the wood details, the trim details would be a painted wood product, or we've been using a lot of the poly ash material. The Boral True Exterior is kind of like a wood-like material. It works like wood, but it's much more durable. But the intent there is to be painted wood or very similar to wood for any of those elements. Like you mentioned, the fiberglass columns are something that's commercially available, so we can purchase something that's got a architecturally historic detailing on those columns. Similar with the balustrade, we haven't selected the exact details, but we're pretty sure we could source something that presumably would also be fiberglass, but that's to be determined. The corner newel posts that we're replacing, which would be these two, those would probably also be a wood material because we would like to match this detail that you can see that's existing on the building. So we would sort of pull that out and make a newel post to match that. And then down below, the stone would actually just be, a boulder, that would be hand cut and carved to fit that space. But it would be a natural stone product. And I think that more or less would capture everything that would be visible, at least in terms of and then the roof, it would be a membrane roof, so a rubber membrane, which really wouldn't be visible from the street anyway.
I believe the narrative mentioned a custom-made gutter.
Yeah, sorry. So the trim detail here, the upper part here would actually, one option there would be to make a custom profile out of, an aluminum, painted aluminum to match the trim detail. So that would actually be custom made to match some of the detailing that's there.
I move that we open to the public.
Do we have a second? No. David, thank you. Is there anybody in the public for this project?
No, there's no one in attendance this evening, and I received no written request to address the board.
Okay.
And then we close public
Close.
discussion.
David, second, Avi,
I think we should probably talk about fiberglass as a material. Cause I don't have a recollection of approving fiberglass. I don't remember seeing a lot of proposals with fiberglass.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think we don't typically see porch projects like this. I can't think of a recent proposal to build a new porch or replace a porch on a house in a historic district. So I think this might be your first look at a fiberglass column.
I mean, we looked at some rear porches years ago. So is that what is commercially, I mean, that's just what's available now? So is this a product that we're going to essentially have to accept? I mean, I can get to seeing accepting it, well, your drawings are beautiful. And it makes it look like the columns are matching the engaged piers or posts of the that there's a lot of similarity. Is that what's actually is that what a product on the market will actually do, is replicate the historic one? Because in the drawings, I was drawn to your drawing simply because there does seem to be a match to try and replicate those architectural details. But if it's a just on the market product, I don't imagine it will match the drawings quite as accurately. Is that?
Yeah,
I have a related question, which is, we're replacing a porch that was put on presumably in the 1950s outside the period of significance. How bound are we to materials replacing a non-contributing aspect?
yeah, I do think there's some flexibility. I think the important thing here is to determine whether visually the proposed, the proposal, the material is compatible with this property and the historic district in general. I know that before the Henry St. John Historic District was landmarked, there was a property that had columns. It's the INHS office building. The columns in the front of that building are all fiberglass. And I and Lynn both thought they were wood until we actually looked at them. So they look like wood, they're painted, so they match the finish of everything around them, and neither one of us could tell until we knocked on them that they were fiberglass. So I think fiberglass columns can look authentic and appropriate in a historic context. Here, I think, we're not really sure if this is a portion of the original porte cochere or if it truly is a new build from the 1950s. The columns that are there don't really seem to architecturally relate to anything else that's happening on the property. So, I think here you're not, in my opinion, not replacing historic fabric with an alternate material. You're replacing something that's likely not historic fabric with an alternate material that can be visually compatible with the historic environment.
I would point out there's a column schedule. A2 of A102. There's a little bit more detail on the proposed columns, the poly Tuscan cat and poly Tuscan base.
And could I respond to some of that, or should I wait?
I would point out that the capitals above are Corinthian. Up with the second.
Yeah.
Right.
So it would be more like the policy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, that's historically accurate to progress in stylistic age. Well, the ones on the engaged version are squared. Right, and these would be more. They are circular. I would say that I don't have a problem with altering the existing porch, so I'm not trying to, it's not an effort to preserve, it's an effort to make sure what the new porch is appropriate, is where I'm going. So I don't like, to Brian's point, I'm not concerned significantly about, this is a bit of a hodgepodge, it doesn't speak, it's not an engaged design. Just suggested that it's not original. I think Henry Miller would have done better. So I'm not concerned from that standpoint. It's just, I'd like to have a little bit of conversation on the nuanced details. So is that, we've seen balustrades replaced also in other projects, or I'm aware of them being replaced in other projects. Is it now typical to go to fiberglass instead of wood? Because I would feel like that is a common. Wooden balustrades are still accessible in the market.
That I don't recall a time that we approved, maybe the Clinton House, when they did the rooftop balustrade. Where they proposed, I mean, I think they were replacing metal balusters with wood balusters. I can't think of a time that we looked at fiberglass balusters.
I don't remember. But could we approve fiberglass for this project without setting precedent for more contributing structures?
I mean, I think if the justification here is that, you know, historic fabric isn't being replaced, that it's, you know, non-historic fabric, that is being removed and replaced with more non-historic material. I think that's very different than if this was a historic porch that was deteriorating and somebody had a proposal to replace everything. Yeah.
No, by the time you're done, you're gonna basically replace this entire porch from the stone first floor all the way up to the top of the balustrades. It's gonna be all new, basically.
Yes, yeah, everything that's currently attached to the building would remain, like around the ground floor door and window, and so those 4 sort of half columns that are against the building and on both stories would remain. But yeah, everything about the porch would be replaced. And again, we don't know even if any of this is part of that original design. I think all of it's potential that all of this was rebuilt, I think rather poorly, even, you know, sometime in the 1950s or maybe sometime between the 30s and the 50s. So I'm not sure any of this is technically original.
Well, the design looks really nice. It's definitely an improvement. It seems as though what we have to decide is this fiberglass is acceptable or not.
Well, there's a lot of other things that aren't really firmly called out here, like what's the porch ceiling and what's all the different molding profiles on the built up entablature, eaves, and to that point, do you follow the large green trim that runs around the building between the lower stone and the upper shingles, or do you do something different like is done here? And so there's gonna be some that to get the details resubmitted and either approved by staff or with more detailed drawings. But I'd like to somehow improve it in concept, but request that more details and material specifications come back, because this is really early schematic design, I would say. Either for staff approval or for.
Yeah, I would support Steve in that. I think normally we would not approve a project of this scope just based on the sketch like this.
So what sort of ceiling, what are the details of that gutter, what are the details of the, yeah.
So if we approve the concept, what do we want to do at that point? Do we want staff to approve final details, or do we want it to come back?
I don't have an opinion.
Is there an option somewhere in between where we take a stab at it with staff review, and obviously Brian could kick it back to you if there are any questions at that point?
That would be okay.
I think going back to the fiberglass column, the one place where this might rot out would be at the base of the columns. So that would be one argument, fiberglass columns versus wood.
I mean, I worked on a project that had structural columns, and they did a replacement of wood structural columns, and they put mahogany as the base.
Yeah.
So I can't remember what the wood was, but it was mahogany base for that very reason.
Yeah, I mean, if I could respond to that, I mean, I think we could almost certainly get, I believe, commercially available, the same profiles, the same details in wood as we can in fiberglass. I think the sort of obvious advantage to fiberglass is just the durability and longevity and how it holds paint and becomes just much less of a long-term headache for the owner. And like Brian said, you really, as certainly from a distance, you really can't tell the difference. It's really just a question of, you know, you got to get up and knock on it to even know that it's not real. So, I mean, again, it's not, we're not doing it for any reason other than durability and longevity. And this particular company, HB&G, is a company that makes these permacast columns that are specifically, you know, using historic details, and I'm positive are approved in many historic districts. Again, not necessarily as restoration or preservation, but as, you know, compatible. So it's a very commonly used product line. I also wanted to point out, I don't disagree that the Tuscan column that we're proposing may or may not be the exact column that we should be using, given that the upper columns have more of a Corinthian detail. That style is certainly available. I mean, we can pick and choose. It was interesting. We picked up the Tuscan simply because that's what's there now today. We're just doing a larger version of that. And I will say, we do see the sort of mix and match historically. You see it quite a bit, whether it was done on purpose or just by accident based on somebody not knowing the difference, but it's not uncommon to see a little mix and match.
Well, I would say that I would like to see, I think and what I would want Brian to be looking for is how close the cap can be to the engaged or historic version on the ground floor. Because my guess is it wasn't a mistake or a coincidence that the two different versions exist on the facade. And so I think it would be inappropriate to do a Corinthian cap on the ground floor. But I would like to see detailing that is as close as reasonably possible, you know, as close as possible. Because I think those should be in conversation with each other.
I agree. You're talking about the 4 pilasters engaged columns.
Yeah.
Closest they could be to that would seem like what William would have done.
So does everybody feel that we could approve the concept, and then have this fine tuning done by Brian? Are we okay with this?
I do. And leaving it to his judgment, whether at some point it should come back to us.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we read something before
Yeah.
David leaves?
Yes, read the resolution and then we can add the condition that staff shall approve final design details.
Okay. Who would like to volunteer to read the resolution for 106 the Knoll project? Who wants to
I
volunteer?
can do it as my party contribution.
How about the back, the rear porch?
So the rear porch, that work met criteria for a staff level review, so.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So beginning with the last whereas, beginning with the resolve.
Yeah.
I think in this case, it would be appropriate to start with the second to last whereas on the first page.
Whereas the proposed work on the rear porch meets criteria for staff level review per the landmarks ordinance in the city of Ithaca Historic District and landmark design guidelines, and has been approved. And whereas public hearing for the purpose of considering approval of the application for a certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of the front porch and door infill was conducted at the regularly scheduled ILPC meeting on August 20th, 2024. Now therefore be it resolved that the ILPC has made the following findings of fact concerning the property in the proposal. As identified in the city of Ithaca's Cornell Heights Historic District summary statement, the period of significance for the area now known as the Cornell Heights Historic District is 1898 to 1937. As indicated in the New York State Building Structure Inventory Form, The William H. Miller designed colonial revival residence at 106 The Knoll was constructed between 1899 and 1900 for a Cornell University professor of mathematics. Constructed within the period of significance of the Cornell Heights Historic District and possessing a high level of integrity, the property is a contributing element of the Cornell Heights Historic District. As documented in the historic photograph submitted with the certificate of appropriateness application, the front porch is either a remnant of the house's original porte cochere or was added after the porte cochere was removed sometime between the 1930s and 50s. In consideration of this and all approvals of proposals for alterations, new construction or demolition in historic districts, potential adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance and value of either the landmark or if the improvement is within the district of the neighboring improvements in such district. In considering architectural and cultural value, the commission shall consider whether the proposed change is consistent with the historic value and the spirit of the architectural style of the landmark or district in accordance with section 228-6 of the municipal code. In making this determination, the commission is guided by the principles set forth in section 228-6B of the municipal code as further elaborated in section 228-6C and by the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and in this case specifically the following principles and standards. Principle number 2, the historic features of a property located within and contributing to the significance of a historic district shall be altered as little as possible, and any alterations made shall be compatible with both the historic character of the individual property and the character of the district as a whole. Principle number 3, new construction located within a historic district shall be compatible with the historic character of the district within which it is located. Standard number 2, the historic character of a property will be retained if preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features and spaces to characterize the property will be avoided. Standard number 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. With respect to principle number 2, standard number 2, and standard number 9, the replacement of the front porch and infill of the door will not remove distinctive materials and will not alter features and spaces that characterize the property. Also, with respect to principle number 2 and standard number 9, the proposed porch and infill panel are compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of the property and its environment. Resolved that based on the findings set forth above, the proposal will not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance of the Cornell Heights Historic District as set forth in section 228-6. Be it further resolved that the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission determines that the proposal meets criteria for approval under section 228-6 of the municipal code. And be it further resolved that the ILPC approves the application of the certificate of appropriateness with the following condition.
And the recommended staff approval of design details and materials. I can add the caveat that if staff determines that the materials that are submitted do not meet criteria for staff will review, it will come back to the commission. I would recommend adding at least a little information just for justification for the use of fiberglass gear. That way, in the future, if other applications come forward, we can say, you know, this was a unique situation because.
And I just picked up on something while that was being read, that the proposed cornerstones to cover the bottom of the columns actually cut into some original sandstone steps on the sides. It's gonna be very difficult to carry off. Do you know what I'm talking about, Noah? Those boulders you're proposing, those
Yeah,
samples on the side, they're like Berea sandstone or something matching the house. And the way they're drawn, they're actually cutting like a difficult acute corner, round corner out of those steps. So
We're
Yeah, I'm
actually
saying-
proposing the inverse. We're proposing to cut the boulders, cut a wedge out of the boulders so that they engage the existing stone.
So I guess I just want to say, if you're building the entire porch from scratch, couldn't you just bring the whole porch in 3 inches? So you wouldn't have to do any of that?
Potentially.
It-
Yeah.
I don't, okay, so you're not gonna cut the original step? I was gonna put. I mean, the one place it has to match is the balusters upstairs have to match the outermost pilasters upstairs. But there's, the header doesn't come into anything in particular downstairs on the first floor. It doesn't come into any kind of, so, I don't know, I just picked up on that. You're gonna cut a granite, and I also have troubles with those boulders heaving in frost, like the stone outside our rear door does every winter. That could be a problem.
Yeah, these are really good points, and to be honest, it was us having a little bit of fun and trying to solve a problem that maybe doesn't need to be solved, as you suggested. Maybe it's just a matter of shrinking the building a couple of inches to catch the column bases. I think that would work. We were proposing to take that whole beam entablature, the existing detailing, and just document that and recreate that, so that you're right, it doesn't engage the building in any, it doesn't hit any particular place that seems critical. So I think just kind of matching that, other than we
I guess
don't
it
want
might be-
a scar in the stone against the building, so we want to kind of tie into the same place.
Yeah, and it might leave a gap in the green trim on the building, so
Right.
like we filled. Anyway, all right, I won't dwell on it anymore.
Well, no, I see, I think that's I personally think that's a good idea. I mean, I think that would solve a problem that's being created. If it is possible to do that, and you don't think it would be visually very noticeable. Because the main facade, right, would remain
Yeah,
the
you
same.
want to think if that upper
Short,
beam came into a pilaster of some kind, but it doesn't.
yeah.
All right, well, folks, I really do need to go, so,
You're gonna miss all the fun.
pardon me?
You're gonna miss all the fun.
This continued discussion, no, it has been fun, I think it's a good project. I think your point is really interesting, that they just pull it in 3 inches, then no boulder. Brian?
I do think that we should probably vote before the person who moved the resolution leaves the meeting.
Right, okay.
So do we have a second on the resolution as it's been read and proposed changes? Avi, thank you. Okay, all in favor of approving? Okay, unanimous.
And I just want to point out, I would have had to recuse myself on the next issue anyway,
Oh, yeah.
and so, you know, right.
I don't think you need to anymore, because it's not the original proposal.
And I would.
I figured whatever.
All right, good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night, David.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Noah.
Thanks,
See
Noah.
ya. Bye-bye.
All right. All right, so next we have Next, we have 105 West Green Street, the Mid Park Historic District proposing to install a 32-inch by 32-inch black vinyl sign on the easternmost window in the first story of the north elevation. So,
It does not appear that we have the applicant with us this evening, but if the commission is willing, I can present on the applicant's behalf. So if you may recall, back in January, the commission reviewed a proposal to add signage to the new Library Place building. As part of that sign package, there was a proposal for an 18-inch by 18-inch sign for the Rook in the subject window. After consulting with their new tenant, the property owner is returning with an application to install a larger 32-inch by 32-inch sign to increase the visibility of the sign and to attract business. The sign meets the requirements of the sign ordinance, but because it was a change in the sign, a pretty substantial, almost doubling the size of the sign, it required additional review. by the commission.
Why is it black? And is it on the inside of the window or outside of the window?
It's on the inside. And it is black because black is kind of the themed color of it.
I want to know more about this new aluminum louver. Did we approve that?
So the louver. Yes, the louver was part of the proposal that was approved in January.
Really?
So that's not, nothing's changing with that now?
No,
It's terrible.
I think I missed that meeting, so I blame.
I don't. believe that. All the other louvers are surrounded by like a aluminum storefront system, and it's recessed 2 to 3 inches. And that one doesn't have the aluminum storefront, isn't recessed, and the caulking job is bad, and
The caulking job, so it's been done.
it's been done. There's a lot of other louvers in the project, but they're all within the storefront systems, window systems. And I don't remember it being called out. At the earlier application. I don't have a problem with sign.
Yeah, 18 by 18 is pretty small for advertising for a business.
It's a very large window, so.
Yeah, it seems like it should be larger than that.
Mhm.
So I don't have a problem with the sign.
I don't have a problem with the sign for the building itself, but I think and I think what the resolution is written is its impact on the commercial district, and I know we have had. I know that we've talked about building advertisements, particularly on Tioga. And about how large the signage can be, and so we've had an engaged conversation on that, so I think it's worth us, even briefly discussing. What the impact of this is on the historic district, because it's, again, I think it's appropriate for this building, like, I don't see it as problematic for the building itself, but that's not really, it's not a historic resource, so that's not really what we're protecting.
Yeah, I think if we're on some kind of post out in front of the building, that would be a whole different situation than where it's really just on the interior like this. Do we need any discussion on this?
I propose to open it to the public.
Oh, yes, but I have a motion to open to the public, thank you.
Second.
Second, Bobby. Any public discussion?
No members of the public submitted written comments and no one signed up to speak.
Okay, motion to close public discussion. Caitlin. Second, Bobby, thank you.
And so they're only doing the advertisement on one facade, it's not, okay.
That is my understanding, but I will double check. That's the issue.
So what do we have here?
So yeah, I don't recall the conversation, but I mean, it sounds like sometimes that in historic districts, the signs have been more restricted than what the city ordinance is.
Absolutely.
Mm,
We talked about it with the Key Bank building. We talked about it with one of the, I don't remember which one on the other one on North Tioga on the east side. I don't know, a professional office of some kind. And that had one that was out in front in a shield, right, a shield sign. But we've definitely talked about it, about signage that's more minimal. I mean, I think with those cases, it was more in keeping of making sure the signage fit in. With Key Bank, it was making sure the signage fit in the space appropriately. I think they originally were proposing something a little bit larger than this, where the signage space had traditionally been, what was appropriate for the architecture. I don't remember the nuance of the detail, but I do remember,
It had to do with fitting it into spandrel beam,
yeah.
Right, yeah.
coordinating with the spandrel beam.
The commission a few years ago reviewed the Berkshire Hathaway sign on the double house.
That's
on East Buffalo Street.
oh, yeah.
Taylor and Taylor.
Thaler and Thaler is the kind of the
One on North
hanging,
Tioga.
yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of.
I believe. The Berkshire Hathaway sign was. Approximately this size. Maybe a little. It's also a smaller building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't wanna see anything illuminated. I'm assuming there's no intention to illuminate this. Okay,
Who would like to read the resolution?
Oh, sure, I can read it. Let's see.
Probably the last whereas.
I think the last whereas. Whereas, public hearing for the purpose of considering approval of the application for certificate of appropriateness was conducted at the regularly scheduled ILPC meeting on August 20th, 2024. Now therefore be it resolved that the ILPC has made the following findings of fact concerning the property and the proposal. As identified in the city of Ithaca's DeWitt Park Historic District summary statement, the period of significance for the area now known as the DeWitt Park Historic District is 1820 to 1930. 105 West Fort Street, formerly 312 to 314 North Cayuga Street, was completed in 2024. Constructed outside of the period of significance of the DeWitt Park Historic District, the property is a non-contributing element. In consideration of this and all approvals and proposals for alterations, new construction or demolition in historic districts, the ILPC must determine if the proposed exterior work will not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance and value of either the landmark, or if the improvement is within a district, of the neighboring improvements in such district. In considering architectural and cultural value, the commission shall consider whether the proposed change is consistent with the historic value and the spirit of the architectural style of the landmark or district in accordance with section 228-6 of the municipal code. In making this determination, the commission is guided by the principles set forth in section 228-6B of the municipal code as further elaborated in section 228-6C and by the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and in this case specifically the following principles and standards. I think we read standard number 9. So as a non-contributing structure, 105 West Court Street by definition does not possess historic materials or features that are subject to protection under the principles enumerated in section 228-5 of the municipal code of the Secretary of the Interior Standards. The ILPC's evaluation of the proposed work is therefore limited to the assessment of the impact of the proposed work on adjacent historic structures in the district and on the DeWitt Park Historic District as a whole, with the guiding principle being that the proposed work must not further reduce the compatibility of non-contributing structure with its historic environment. With respect to standard number 9, the proposed sign is compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of the property and its environment. Resolved that based on findings set forth above, the proposal will not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance of the DeWitt Park Historic District as set forth in section 228-6. And be it further resolved that the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission determines that the proposal meets the criteria for approval under section 228-6 of the municipal code, and be it further resolved that the ILPC approves the application for certificate of appropriateness.
Thank you, Bobby. Do we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Caitlin, thank you. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Very good. Next, we have public comment on matters of interest. If anybody submit anything of interest?
There were no members of the public that sent in comments to be read aloud, and no one signed up to speak this evening.
And we move on to new business. Certified local government review and report. I think a downtown historic district, additional documentation related to Firebrand Books, 141, 143 East State Street. And that was from 1984 to 1993.
So this is a proposal to add a different, additional areas of significance to the Ithaca Downtown Historic District, the National Register District. To include the areas of LGBTQ history and women's history. Currently, the historic district is not noted for its association with these areas of significance. As you recall, Firebrand Books is on the Commons. It's a local landmark. And in order to include that recognition in the National Register, there's a proposal to amend the National Register nomination for the overall district. So this is your opportunity to ask questions about the proposal, and if anybody objects to the additional areas of significance being added to the district, this is your opportunity to voice those concerns.
I think it's wonderful. The women's history and LGBTQ plus history is routinely not represented. And to show that in fact, it was a much more vibrant area in terms of different rationales for preservation is phenomenal. So thumbs up for me.
Seems like we could have done a little more research into it.
Not enough reading materials, Steve.
62 pages.
So I should note that the materials that are in the packet are slightly different than those that we voted on. When we recommended the local landmark designation of the property. In order to include this history in the National Register, the State Historic Preservation Office required the author of the nomination to provide a broader context for Firebrand Books, how it was both regionally and nationally significant. So there's a more robust documentation of what was happening nationally and how this particular business fit in with that context.
Did you write this?
I did not write this. I'm very proud of the person who did.
Yeah. A lot of work went into this.
Yeah.
I think it should say something about the Half Moon cookies at the home dairy, because they were really good.
Oh,
Yeah,
really, that's delicious.
I'm joking, but now, I believe in our nomination that we prepared, we called it the Artist Block Home Dairy Firebrand Books Building. All three.
So that's what it's known as locally. Those histories are included in the National Register District already. The period of significance, I believe, and for that district ends in 1950, so it doesn't include any of this history. That's why in the current nomination, it's referred to only as the Firebrand Books.
Any additional comments, concerns?
Got my support.
Yeah,
So the next step would be to approve this and then send a report back to
Yep. So
the
the
parks.
Yes, so the resolution before you acts as the commission's report to the state review board. The letter that we received with the nomination has the wrong date for the review board day. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't. September 12th is when, so I think the meeting is the 13th or 14th.
There is something weird about the cover letter, like it's dated June and it's dated July 12th and talks about a next meeting on June 12th.
I think it's a boilerplate letter that they might have forgotten to change the date.
Comments are due by September 12th.
What's pretty extraordinary about this, sorry, one more thing, is that typically in preservation, we look at things 50 years old or older. And at least the State Historic Preservation Office, and I believe this too, that the level of significance of this particular resource allows it to be nominated to the National Register before that 50-year window expires. So it's pretty incredible.
No, I'll move the resolution.
So what do we need to do to move this at this?
So we just have to move second and vote on it. If you want to read the resolution, that's,
You should read out whereas.
you should, okay.
Just want to hear me speak. I should
Yes.
turn my microphone on. Whereas in its capacity as a New York State certified local government, as designated in 1986 by the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, the city of Ithaca is required to participate in the nomination process for properties being considered for listing on the state and national registers of historic places. And whereas the specific requirements for participation include: one, after reasonable opportunity for public comment, the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission shall prepare a report stating whether or not, in its opinion, the property meets criteria for listing on the New York State and national registers. And two, the city's chief local elected official, in this case, Mayor Robert Cantelmo.
Can tell.
Am I saying it correctly? Sorry. Shall transmit the commission's report and his recommendation to the State Historic Preservation Office. And whereas the Ithaca Downtown Historic District was respectfully listed in the state and national registers of historic places in 2004 and 2005. And whereas at their upcoming meetings, the New York State Historic Preservation Review Board and the National Park Service are considering expanding the areas of significance of the already listed Ithaca Downtown Historic District to include social history, LBGT, and social history and women's history for the district's association with firebrand books at 141 to 143 East State Street. And whereas the ILPC considered the proposals to expand the areas of significance of the Ithaca Downtown Historic District as noted above at its regular meeting held on August 20th, 2024, the agenda for which is routinely published in the city's official newspaper, the Ithaca Journal, and posted in advance of the meeting in City Hall, 108 East Green Street, and on the city's website. And whereas documentation reviewed by the ILPC includes a letter dated July 12, 2024, sent from R. Daniel McKay, Deputy Commissioner for Historic Preservation and Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer at Parks, and its accompanying materials, including the National and State Register criteria for evaluation, frequently asked questions about state and national registers of historic places in New York State, and the draft National Register of Historic Places continuation sheet documenting the significance of firebrand books, 141 to 143 East State Street. And whereas of the four National Register criteria for evaluation of the significance of firebrand books as it relates to the Ithaca Downtown Historic District is being considered under criterion A, which states: A, properties associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. And whereas, as the significance derived from the district's association with firebrand books occurred within the past 50 years, it is also being considered under criteria consideration G, which states: G, a property achieving significance within the past 50 years if it is of exceptional importance. And whereas the ILPC concurs that the Ithaca Downtown Historic District derives significance under criteria A, specifically social history, LBGT, and social history and women's history for its association with firebrand books at 141 to 143 East State Street, noting the following summary from the Ithaca Downtown Historic District. The Ithaca Downtown Historic District is significant under criterion A and criterion consideration G in the areas of social history, LBGTQ, and women's history for its association with firebrand books, a multiple award-winning lesbian and feminist publishing house. Firebrand, which has headquarters on the second floor of the building at 141 to 143 East State Street in the heart of the historic district, was founded by the activist, editor, and publisher Nancy K. Fariano in 1984 and became a nationally recognized leader of the publishing revolution that occurred during the second wave feminist, women in print, and lesbian and gay movements of the 1970s and 1980s. The press produced work in a wide variety of genres by ethnically and racially diverse authors, including Dorothy Allison, Alison Bechdel, Cheryl Clark, Leslie Feinberg, Jewel Gomez, Audre Lorde, and Minnie Bruce Pratt. Whereas the ILPC has also concurs that the significance of the Ithaca Downtown Historic District derived from its association with firebrand books meets criteria consideration G, noting the following summary from the Ithaca Downtown Historic District additional documentation. Firebrand books meets criteria consideration G in the areas of social history, LGBT and social history, and women's history for its exceptional significance as a nationally recognized leader in the revolution in print culture that occurred as part of the second wave feminist, women in print, and lesbian and gay movements, founded by renowned publicist and activist Nancy K. Bariano. Firebrand is widely recognized by scholars as one of the earliest and most prestigious lesbian, gay, and feminist publishers of the 1980s and 1990s. The press was among the first to publish the important lesbian, trans, and queer artists, including Leslie Feinberg, author of Stone Butch Blues, one of the earliest and most influential books addressing the complexities of gender. Other important artists and books include Alison Bechdel's comic strip Dykes to Watch Out For, Audre Lorde's A Burst of Light, Minnie Bruce Pratt's Crimes Against Nature, and Dorothy Allison's Trash. These books and artists have had a tremendous influence on literary and popular culture, which is evidenced by the press's numerous awards. Operating for 16 years, Firebrand Books is also rare for its unusual longevity within the context of other small women's presses, most of which lasted 2 to 5 years. During its time in business, its books won more Lambda literary awards than those of any other press, and any of its titles are now considered to be classics of LGBT literature, studied and taught in academic settings. A number of the authors continue to publish, now with major publishing houses. Today, Firebrand Books records are housed in Cornell University's Division of Rare and Manuscript Collections, Human Sexuality Collection. Now therefore be it resolved that the ILPC finds that the documentation on Firebrand Books presented in this draft National Register of Historic Preservation continuation sheet meets criteria for inclusion in the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places, and be it further resolved that the ILPC recommends adding additional significance to the areas of social history, LBGT, and social history and women's history to the Ithaca Downtown Historic District for its association with Firebrand Books, 141 to 143 State Street.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Do we have a second, please? Bobby. Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Next, we have approval of minutes. May 21st, 2024. Will be first. Any questions or concerns about the minutes for May 21st?
Notice that there was a condition for the rear yard parking on Eddy Street that a screening plan shall be submitted to ILPC staff. Did that happen?
It did happen. This is 209 Eddy Street. The proposed screening method was a fence. It's your basic wood dog ear fence. It appropriately screens the parking.
The parking been installed?
Yes.
Do you need a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for May 21st, 2024, and June 18th, 2024, as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second for approval of the May minutes? Bobby? Any concerns, questions? All in favor of approval? Okay. Then we have the minutes for June 18th. Any concerns, questions?
Oh, I moved both of them. Hopefully you don't have any concerns.
Yes.
I'd vote yes for both.
Okay.
We need to have a second vote officially.
So. Second on
Lump them together,
Yes.
lumped.
lump them together? Okay.
Right.
I propose that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I will second that.
Very good.
Okay, third.
All in favor? All right.
Is work slowing down on the staff level